Welcome in, everybody. We're diving into something pretty fascinating today. Um, it's the whole idea of faith and finances and, how those choices we make now impact those who come after us.
It's legacy building, but from a different angle.
Yeah, exactly. And you sent over some really thought-provoking material,
Oh, yeah.
like Pastor Gisline's devotional, Fight for Your Finances. It's part of this larger series he's got going, the 2025 Uppercut Arise. Have you heard of this?
I have, yeah. It's gaining some traction.
Yeah, so this Pastor Gisling, he goes by Pastor Guy.
Okay.
And what's really cool is that he blends this practical financial advice, like the nuts and bolts, with this really strong spiritual foundation.
It is interesting. It's like he's bridging two worlds that people don't always think of, together. It's not just about managing money, but viewing it through a lens of faith.
Exactly. And how those choices can ripple through generations.
Yeah, it's a big shift. I mean, people are used to thinking short term, but this is about long-term impact,
Right.
like how our choices affect our kids and grandkids, maybe even beyond.
That's what he calls generational blessing.
Right.
It's not just about the inheritance we leave behind.
No, it's more than that.
It's the values and, the wisdom we pass on.
Setting them up for success, not just handing them money.
Right. And Pastor Guy ties this into Proverbs 3.16. Wisdom gives you a long life in her right hand and in her left hand, riches and honor.
That's pretty cool, actually, connecting wisdom to being financially well off.
It is.
Yeah.
It suggests that real wealth isn't about luck or, circumstance, but about making those smart choices, like the informed ones that are aligned with a deeper understanding of what we have and why we're here, our purpose.
Yeah, and speaking of choices, Pastor Guy lays out this really practical tool in the devotional, the OBD principle.
Oh, yeah. Obligations, needs, desires.
Right. And it's a framework for making those spending decisions without living like, a monk.
It's not about being totally austere all the time, is it?
No, it's more about prioritizing, but without feeling like you're constantly being deprived.
Right, making those smart choices. And it sounds like the idea is that you create this hierarchy, right?
Mm.
And you address the must-haves, the things you absolutely need to take care of first. And then from there, you kind of allocate resources to those other things.
Yeah, strategically. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it. And Pastor G really emphasizes putting God first in this whole thing.
Yeah, that first things first approach.
Right. Prioritizing tithes, offerings, giving back. That's kind of a fundamental part of it.
He makes this connection to stewardship, how we're managing what we've been given.
Which is a concept you see across many faiths, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's this idea that our resources, they ultimately come from a higher power.
And that giving back, that expressing gratitude through giving, it's essential,
Absolutely. It's fascinating how he intertwines those spiritual and practical elements. He also brings up Proverbs 21.20.
Oh, which one's that?
Precious treasures and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it.
That's a powerful one, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like a reminder to be mindful about how we're spending.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how these ancient teachings, they still hold up. We can still apply them to our lives today. I mean, things are a lot more complex, but those core principles, still relevant.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the author himself for a second, Pastor Guy. He's a really interesting guy. He leads a French-speaking congregation.
In Minnesota? Really?
Yeah, in Austin, Minnesota.
Wow, that's fascinating. Les Jolis en Mission, it's called, right?
Yep, that's the one. And it's not just the pastor thing. He's got this incredibly diverse background.
I was just looking at that. It says he's an author, interpreter, mentor.
Yeah, and he's been training to be a nurse, too.
Wow, that's quite a range. He doesn't seem to be limiting himself at all.
Definitely not. And it makes me wonder how all those different experiences, shaped his view of money and how he approaches the whole thing of giving financial advice.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle, right? Trying to see how it all fits together and informs his unique perspective.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. It's not just about the financial stuff. It's about the person behind it, too, and how their experiences shape their message.
For sure. And it makes you wonder how that resonates with his congregation, A French-speaking congregation in Minnesota being given this advice, that's got to be fascinating to see in action.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique blend of influences. But let's get back to the practical advice he offers. How does this OBD principle actually work, in everyday life, especially when it comes to those spending decisions that are always tricky?
Right, because everyone struggles with that. Figuring out what to prioritize, what to cut back on, it's a constant balancing act.
Absolutely. So how about we dig into that a bit more?
So this OBD principle, it sounds like it could be a really practical tool. I'm curious to hear more about how it actually works, like in real life, especially for folks who maybe are overspending or just feeling overwhelmed by all the financial decisions.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So with the OBD, you break down your spending into these three main categories: obligations, needs, and desires. And Pastor Gee says, tackle those obligations first. Those are the things you can't really avoid,
Yeah.
like taxes.
Right. Got to pay the tax man.
Exactly. And rent, or your mortgage if you've got one, utilities, any debt you're paying off.
So all the essentials, the things you absolutely have to take care of.
Yep, yep. It's funny, he actually uses the term Caesar when he talks about taxes.
Caesar, what, like from the Bible?
Yeah, exactly. He's referencing that passage, give to Caesar what is Caesar's.
Oh, right, right. I get it. So it's not just about, personal needs, but also those obligations we have to the government and to, a higher power, I guess.
It is. It is. It's like recognizing that there's this bigger system at play.
Yeah.
Our finances aren't just about us. We're part of something larger.
Makes you think about accountability, like
Yeah.
there are multiple layers to it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And from there, Pastor G really stresses putting God first. That whole first things first idea.
Right. Tithes, offerings, all of that.
Exactly. And it becomes like this fundamental part of the financial picture.
Which, again, ties into what we were saying before. It's a concept that's deeply rooted in so many faiths, acknowledging that ultimately everything we have comes from somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, and expressing that gratitude through giving.
Right, but it brings up an interesting question, How do we balance that? The spiritual obligations and then the very real earthly obligations, like practically speaking.
That's where the needs come in.
Yeah.
This category is all about separating the truly essential things we need to be healthy and, live our lives.
Food, clothing, shelter, that kind of thing.
Right, right. Healthcare, transportation, the basics. And Pastor G really emphasizes being mindful here, making choices that genuinely support your well-being without going overboard.
It's a tough one, though, isn't it? I mean, especially now, there's so much pressure to buy, like figuring out what you actually need versus what you just want. It's a constant battle.
Yeah, and it's like he's encouraging us to develop this kind of internal filter, to ask ourselves, do I really need this? Or am I just being influenced by all the advertising and, what everyone else is doing?
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. Like tuning out the noise and focusing on what truly matters.
Exactly, exactly. And this leads into the last category, desires. These are the things that, make life more enjoyable. Entertainment, travel, hobbies, maybe even luxury items, But they're not essential for survival.
So it's like the nice to haves, but not the must haves.
Right. And Pastor Gee doesn't say those desires are bad. It's more about being strategic with them.
That's a really interesting approach, actually. It's not about, depriving yourself completely, but finding that balance where you can still enjoy those things without jeopardizing your financial stability.
Yeah, and without, neglecting the obligations we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It's like he's encouraging us to find joy within a structure, to recognize that financial well-being isn't just about the numbers, but also about aligning our spending with what's truly important to us.
Yeah, I like that. Finding fulfillment in a way that supports both our material and spiritual goals.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of this idea of financial freedom. Like it's
Yeah.
not just about being debt-free, but also about having the flexibility to make choices that align with your values and your purpose.
Right, right. And I'm curious, how does Pastor Gee connect this back to the whole idea of generational blessings? Does he talk about any specific strategies for, building that financial legacy that goes beyond just leaving an inheritance?
Well, he actually stresses the importance of setting a good example. Like modeling wise financial behavior for your kids and grandkids.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just about the money itself, but also the lessons you're teaching.
Exactly. It's about teaching them how to make informed choices, how to manage money responsibly, and even how to view their resources as a way to make a positive impact on the world.
It's like weaving financial literacy into the fabric of your family values,
I love that. It's not just a handout, it's an education. And it's almost like a spiritual inheritance, in a way, passing down those values of stewardship and generosity.
Exactly. And what I find really fascinating is that, Pastor Gee doesn't just come from a purely theological background.
Right, we've already touched on that. I mean, leading a French-speaking congregation in Minnesota, that's unique in itself.
Right. And then you've got his diverse background, all those roles he's had, author, interpreter, mentor, even training to be a nurse.
It really makes you wonder how all those experiences have shaped his perspective on people's financial struggles, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like maybe working as a nurse gave him insight into the financial burdens that can come with illness.
Yeah.
It adds this whole other layer to his teachings.
It does, it does. And you think about his work as an interpreter, he's probably encountered all sorts of financial challenges within immigrant communities or people navigating language barriers.
Absolutely. There's this richness to his perspective,
Yeah.
but you don't always find.
Yeah.
It's not your typical financial advisor. He's got this deep understanding of the human experience and how finances are woven into so many aspects of our lives.
Exactly. It's more relatable that way, less like, someone preaching from a position of privilege.
It's genuine, and it makes you want to listen because you know it's coming from a place of experience and a genuine desire to help others. It really is amazing,
Hmm.
how Pastor Guy takes these two things, faith and finances, that people often see as separate and shows how they can actually work together.
And you know what strikes me? It's refreshing to see a resource that really embraces that spiritual side of money. A lot of the traditional financial advice out there, it kind of ignores that aspect.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's like he acknowledges that our beliefs and values play a huge role in how we think about money and how we handle it.
Right, right. And it's not just about, being good with numbers. It's about aligning your financial decisions with a deeper sense of purpose. Like, what are you trying to achieve with your money? What's important to you?
And what really hit home for me was this whole idea of the ripple effect. How our choices today don't just affect us, but they impact future generations.
It's powerful stuff, isn't it? That whole concept of generational blessings. It makes you stop and think. Like we need to look beyond just our immediate needs and think about how our actions are shaping things for our kids, grandkids, and maybe even beyond.
It's about building a legacy, but not just in the material sense.
Exactly. It's more about the values and the wisdom we pass down.
Yeah.
And setting an example of a healthy relationship with money.
Right, right. It's like a spiritual inheritance.
And in a world where everything's about instant gratification, buy now, pay later, all of that, this message is more important than ever, I think.
I agree. I agree. It's a call to kind of resist those pressures and make choices that truly align with our values and the kind of impact we want to have.
Absolutely.
And, we talk a lot about Pastor Guy's background, but it really does add such a unique layer to all of this. I mean, leading a French-speaking congregation in Minnesota, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, right. And then you have all those other roles he's had. Author, interpreter, mentor, even training to be a nurse at one point. It's pretty amazing.
It is. It speaks to a real depth of experience. And it makes his message feel so much more, I don't know, authentic and compassionate.
Yeah, you can tell he's not just talking about these things in theory. He's drawing from real life experiences. And you get the sense that he genuinely wants to help people, to empower them.
Absolutely. It's been a fascinating deep dive, exploring this whole intersection of faith and finances.
It has. It has. And it leaves us with a lot to think about. What if we started looking at our financial decisions not just as personal choices, but as acts of faith? Like actions that have the potential to ripple through time and impact generations to come.
Wow, that's a really powerful thought.
How would that change things, our approach to spending, saving, investing,
Right.
everything?
I think you've hit on something really important there. And, we've only scratched the surface here. There's so much more to explore within this whole world where faith and finances meet. But for now, I want to thank everyone for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you for listening.
And we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Think about what resonated with you today. What questions did this spark for you? And most importantly, how can you align your financial decisions with your values and your vision for the future?